We thought you might need this.
Oh, you know me so well.
There's no shame in being yourself, Ramona. All this here, this is temporary. Real life is waiting. Did you know that a lot of people's brains trick their past memories? If there's something that happened in your life that was stressful, traumatic, and painful, the bad memories of that event will fade from your mind. Not completely. You'll still have those memories that hurt, but that hurt will become less significant to you. The specific bad parts of those memories will start to fade, and you'll even become forgetful of them. That's not everyone's brains, obviously. Some people still feel and remember those horrible experiences and remember the memories so much, it being etched into their minds so thoroughly that that person will do everything in their power to separate themselves. Sometimes I definitely feel like I fit in both camps. Some things are really hard to talk about until whatever else happens in your life, and sometimes it's viewed in a blurred, dimmed mist, along with video games, X-Men, garage rock galore. And this is why Scott Pilgrim is my favorite piece of fiction ever made.
Scott, I think you're the nicest guy I've ever dated.
That's kind of sad.
It's pathetic. Who the hell asked you?
If you're a millennial or a fellow Gen Zer, you'll probably know the story that inspired the most incel song ever created. BPD and ecstasy, conceited with low self-esteem. She's a teenage dream if you hate yourself. Bright dyed hair and obnoxious clothes thinks communism is the way to go. She's a whore, a hole, a dime a dozen Jezebel. Word mine and SSRI's 1,000 yards there for all those guys that you fucked and sucked before you came along. But most people have only seen Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, starring super baddie Michael Cera.
Lesbians with you.
Honestly, I think the movie kind of ruined the story of Scott Pilgrim. Before you dislike and comment my IP address, just listen to this sentence. The Scott Pilgrim movie makes you feel he's just like me for real, while the comic makes you think he's everything I have hated about myself. So after I explain that, then you can leak my Discord messages. The basic gist of every version of the story is that Scott Pilgrim has to defeat the 7 evil exes of his goth mommy girlfriend. So why does she want to kill me? Is she dating one of your evil ex-boyfriends or something?
Evil exes.
Why do you keep saying that?
You mean he doesn't know? Do you seriously work here? When do you get a job? I can't believe you haven't been bragging about this.
What is she talking about? I think I'm not getting something.
He really doesn't know. Scott, isn't it obvious?
You and her?
Oh, relax. It was a phase. I thought we weren't wearing these things anymore.
You had a sexy phase? A lot of young men relate to Scott Pilgrim because of his charmer, geeky nature. The nerd himbo. Except in the comic, he's more like a nerdy himbo. There's a difference, trust me.
But it's hard.
You know, in high school,
Yeah?
how we never went for it? Well,
Lisa, you're drunk.
Am I, Scott?
I think so, yeah. Alan versus Ken, if you will. Also, the messages of the stories are completely different, but I'll get to that after I'm done dissecting the comic and why it makes me contemplate my life choices. Lazy, broke millennial Scott Pilgrim is just like you. He plays an instrument he sucks at in a band no one listens to, and he has a very homosexual best friend. Where's your fancy psychic boyfriend I'm not allowed to meet? Mobile? He's at a business thing on the astral plane, but he left his body for me to play with. Oh, you, I'm just kidding. Besides, now I have your body to keep me company. He's dumb and stupid, just like you, and he has to fight to keep being with his girlfriend, Ramona Flowers. Ramona's exes go from sexier to sexier as Scott and Ramona experience themselves, learning the good and bad parts of each other. She's his kid's sister, but I guess it's like she got sucked into this alternate dimension when she was little, and this demon guy taught her all this black magic and like twisted her soul. Scott, for instance, is so cutely aloof that he'll be explaining X-Men lore without realizing his girlfriend is low-key having a panic attack. He also dated a high schooler and cheated on her with Ramona. Ramona usually cheats on her partners or treats them like phases. She's dabbled in being a bitch. But of course they have lovable sides too. Scott fought an entire school to be with his ex Kim. Scott is genuinely in love with Ramona and changes for the better to be with her. Gets a job, moves in with her, and decides to become more responsible. But all of this is tinged by Scott's selfishness. Scott is so dumb that he thinks beating up all of his girlfriend's exes is going to keep the relationship stable, which that it doesn't.
Did you cheat on me? Scott,
Yes.
did you cheat on me with Knives Chow?
What? No. I cheated on Knives Chow with you.
Is there even a difference?
You weren't wronged?
I guess I just thought you were better than that.
So did I. It happened. I've been trying to forget about it.
You're a bad person.
I'm a bad person. You think I'm a bad person?
Well, you're a liar and a cheat.
I'm trying to be better, Ramona. I'm trying to change for you.
Great. Good job, you tricked me into thinking you were a decent guy. But you're just another evil ex-boyfriend waiting to happen, aren't you?
Are you breaking up with me?
I don't want to talk about it. I thought you were better than that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for being a bad person. Please don't break up with me.
Sometimes sorry isn't good enough.
I'ma fight the twins and Gideon and make everything better, starting tomorrow.
Yeah, you do that.
Don't break up with me. Just because he technically didn't cheat on Ramona and he cheated on his high school girlfriend with her, he thinks Ramona wouldn't feel like he was a bad person. Also, the only reason he dated Knives was because it was an easy relationship, since Knives was very impressionable and not really emotionally complex since she's just a high schooler. We also see how much Scott deludes himself about how altruistic he was in his past relationship, not willing to see his own faults. We learned this about how Scott beat up a whole school for Kim.
Not to mention you screwed over poor Simon Lee. Well, we both did, but the look on his face.
Simon Lee? But he was a bad guy.
Simon Lee, the Chinese kid? I was dating him, Scott. I think he hugged me once.
You're going down, Simon! When we learn about how Scott and his ex Envy broke up, it's told in Scott's perspective, showing when she would bitch and stopped being a nerdy weeb and started smoking, and eventually stole Scott's whole band, leaving him behind to date a vegan. But when he confronts Todd the vegan, he says, You ass! She used to be nice! Even though we've seen her different while with Scott. Also, it's implied Scott held Envy back because he didn't want to get better at playing bass in the band and didn't want to actually get into the music industry, which is holding her career back. So, Scott convinces himself of not only being more of a victim in the situation and blames it more on Todd than the actual circumstances of the relationship. That leads to him not looking into his shitty actions. He even makes himself forget how he treated knives like a relationship on easy mode. You know he cheated on you, right?
Well, yeah, but
He was dating you because it was easy. As soon as Ramona showed up, that was that.
I was easy?
He two-timed you guys and acted like it was nothing. He's my friend, but come on. Anyway, it's been what, 6 months since you broke up?
7 months on Monday.
You see, you had the right to know. After Ramona leaves him for a bit in the story, he asks Knives, "Do you want to have sex? I think we should have sex. Casual sex." After I got out of treatment, I tried casual stuff, and that was the worst possible option. I was trying to be something I wasn't. Before I went into treatment, I was in a relationship with a girl I was in love with. Combined with the substances I was taking, the trauma of that relationship and breakup was half of the reason I was in treatment. I would try to forget the shitty parts of my side to make me feel better about myself. But after some maturing, I realized it's okay if I was shitty, but I have to remember that I was, so I don't forget, so I can remember the pain so I can be better. But before we finish Scott's story, let's explain Ramona Flowers is a different side of the same coin. The reason she treats people like phases is because in each relationship, she's a different version of herself. When she feels bad about a relationship, she leaves so she can start over because she hates how she is. She dates Scott for the same reason he dated Knives, because he's easy. Of course, she loves him, but when it starts to get complicated and she gets doubtful, she leaves Scott, just like all of her other relationships. Hey, so, I took care of the twins. They had Kim, but she's fine. They told me some things. Not everything they said was necessarily true, but Ramona, I love you, okay? I love you here and now. I don't care who you were, or where you're from, or what you did, as long as you love me.
I've done bad things.
We both have. Everyone has.
I'm a bad person.
People can change, Ramona.
Scott, thanks.
You're welcome.
I had a good time.
Wait, what? Both Scott and Ramona are in a self-destructive cycle. Scott doesn't acknowledge his past, so he doesn't change. Ramona is stuck on the past. Ramona will never let herself be comfortable. And if things go south, she won't stay to fix the relationship. She is not comfortable being herself. When I was little, I moved around a lot and went to a lot of different schools. Every time I would change to fit how my classmates were. I wouldn't even be myself. And since no one knew the real me, I didn't want to contact them out of school. So when I moved, I wouldn't keep any friends. I didn't stop doing this cycle until last year, so not the best strategy. We were high school sweethearts, but I had to move away. It wasn't my fault.
Are you kidding? You didn't even tell me you were leaving. I heard it from Lisa. You're moving to Toronto? I didn't talk to her for a month after that.
So sometimes I would lie about my past relationships. I told my first girlfriend I had an ex named JJ, but it was hard pretending she was real, so I eventually told my girlfriend that JJ died of an overdose to kill off the character. Inadvertently, I used the sympathy from that though. Karma's such a bitch. In my first rehab, my only roommate was a guy named JJ. He was a pretty funny dude. He'd make everyone laugh, and even the therapist said he should go do stand-up comedy. But he'd always have this side of him that felt like this depressive state. You could tell in his jokes and the way he'd have mood swings that he wasn't happy. A lot of his jokes would be suicide jokes. Then I learned a couple months ago that he died of an overdose. And after going through treatment, I looked at myself objectively, and it made me realize just because I sucked doesn't mean I can't stop sucking. Ramona earned the power of love. The power of love healed her wounds.
Gideon, I think it's safe to say it's over between us.
And Gideon, Ramona's last ex, is what Scott would be if he kept ignoring his flaws.
Scott.
Forget it, okay? Forget I said anything. Let's forget the whole thing.
Your head.
I'm fine. Let's move on already. Let's go.
Scott, I'm sorry. Calm down. Dude.
It's the nega Scott.
You can't keep living like this, Scott.
Leave me alone. I just need to kill him so I can forget her and move on.
But if you keep forgetting your mistakes, you'll just keep making them again.
I don't care. It's better than having to live with myself.
Everything you've done wrong is just gonna keep following you around, Scott. You've got to hold on. Otherwise, I don't know.
Ramona. I remember everything. An egotistical, manipulative dick nips.
Get out of my life, Scott. Lisa said you were moving away.
Gideon, I think I understand you, man. And now, I have to kill you. Getting rid of me won't save you. You're your own worst enemies, both of you.
No, I'm pretty sure you're worse, dude.
You're definitely worse. But the movie doesn't give a shit about that. In the movie, Scott's lesson is learning self-respect. Scott Pilgrim's whole character trait is not being a respectable person. And he's still shitty in the movie. He honestly treats Knives shittier in the movie.
Is Scott here? You know what?
Scott's portrayed as more of a meek, sympathetic character. Also, the original end for the movie was Scott ending up with Knives, the 17-year-old, and that is far from respectable as possible. All of the nuance and morals of the comic are separated in the movie. Not saying the movie's bad. I love the movie. It just doesn't really have a point, which sucks, since the comic had such a profound effect on me. But you know what does have a point? A lot of fans don't like it because Netflix marketed it as a more faithful adaptation of the comic with beautiful, fluid animation. But in actuality, it's an entire new story. Kind of the same reason why people hate the Final Fantasy VII remake games or the Evangelion rebuild movies. Advertised as an updated adaptation of beloved stories, really pinnacles of their genre. But while you experience them more, you realize they entirely changed the story in a really meta way that does pay tribute to the original source material while adding their own sauce to their interpretation of the point of the story. Actually, I'm giving way too much credit to Final Fantasy, but the Eva rebuild movies do follow those descriptions. They're good, give them a try if you're a fan of the original series. But that's the flaw in these though. If you haven't experienced the original stories and watch these new versions by themselves, they suck. If if you see the Eva Rebuild movies without the context of the original, you'll find it extremely confusing and kind of insane and out of left field with what happens. Also, some people's arcs won't impact you because you have no context from the original. In FF7 remake games, when you see that time travel ghosts are making sure the timeline occurs correctly and Sephiroth is trying to change his fate, you don't understand why because you haven't experienced what's supposed to happen in the original game. In Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, an older version of Scott, after the events of the original story, steals his younger self to tell him to not date Ramona because they will eventually break up. We see after their breakup, Scott went right back to his original ways of crashing with his gay roommate Wallace Wells, being in a band no one listens to and doing nothing with his life, just like the beginning of the original story. This shows people can still fall into their old bad habits, even though they had moved on from them and gotten better. Let's just say I've done the exact same thing before in relationships, never opening up because I thought the true me wasn't lovable. And we also see Ramona in the present trying to find out what happened to Scott while reconciling with her exes.
You left without a word? You made me feel like nothing!
I'm sorry.
Apology accepted.
And in the end, Scott learns that he needs to learn to always be strong, no matter what. And Ramona learns about forgiveness and truly moving on. And her arc is way more clear than it is in the comic, literally showing her realizing her faults, but being able to still love herself. She should have chased Scott and his love after he pushed her away, because that's what he did for her.
Hey, because I'll have a lot of trouble saying it later, let me say it now. I love you, Scott. And I run away from the thing that I love. But what I've done in the past doesn't have to define me. Help me keep remembering that, okay?
It's been 2 years since I went into treatment, and I was able to change the shittiness. Anyone can. Anyone can earn the power of change.